32 selections, 32 names. Mel Kiper and Field Yates are about to tell you which players will hear their names called on night one of the NFL Draft. Plus, we're responding to your questions, your takes, and your draft dreams live as First Draft starts right now. Hi, everybody, and welcome to First Draft. There are the gentlemen you want to hear from. As always, Mel Kiper and Field Yates. I am Greeny. You can hear us and see us every week this college football season on Thursday afternoons, live on the NFL on ESPN YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts, and with the reminder that Mel's Big Board is out on ESPN.com and available every Friday. So, guys, we're going to change it up a little bit. You guys are going to love this. We are going to go into the nitty-gritty. So all season long, we've been focusing on the big names, the brand names, the big stars, the quarterbacks, the names that even the non-draft geeks are aware of. Today, we're going deep. Let's talk about some names that people may not know enough about, but most certainly will when we start working our way towards April. We're going to call this Day One Names You Need to Know. And Mel, as the senior member of the team, we'll let you go first. Give us a name that people, absolutely everyone, needs to know as we work our way towards April.
You're the very senior member of the team. But in terms of, I'll go with Nick Scourton. I've mentioned his name, and I do feel we talked about Nick Scourton when he was at Purdue, when he had all those sacks and tackles for loss, 10 sacks, 15 tackles for loss to be exact. He already has 11 tackles for loss. At the end of the first half against Mississippi State, I'm watching the game, and he gets that bend coming around the edge, and he creates an interception, but he goes off with a little bit of an arm. He had a couple little issues during that game. I'm worried about, is he going to be another one of the great players getting hurt? But he's going to be up against LSU at College Station, and boy, it's going to be fun to see Emory Jones Jr. because he'll come off that left side a lot. You got Emory Jones Jr., right tackle at LSU, and you got Will Campbell, left tackle at LSU, and you got Nick Scourton, number 11, and you don't realize, we're number 5 at Purdue. Number 11 at A&M is about 6'4", 280, 285 pounds. And this kid is a dominant performer. I love the hustle, of the ability to be a multi-dimensional player who can beat you in a variety of ways, plays the run strong. I think he's the 6th best player in this draft. I think he's climbing. I think Nick Scourton is a name. We thought at Purdue he had a chance to be really special. He goes to Texas A&M, and he's even risen his game up another level. So for me, we talked going into the year about Abdul Carter at Penn State and James Pearce Jr. Tennessee and Mykel Williams at Georgia. Who was going to emerge from that group? Well, guess what? Nick Scourton has emerged from that group to become the guy as a defensive end who plays on his feet, but he's 6'4", about 280 and 285, which is amazing. He's going to get a name called very early in late April in the NFL draft.
Yeah, Mel, by the way, kind of an unconventional build for a guy that's a dominant edge, right? 6'4", 280 pounds. And you mentioned how he's just getting better and better by the year. No surprise for this reason. He just turned 20 years old. So if he declares for this draft, which most people around the league do think is a real possibility, he will be 21, like 2 weeks before the season begins next year. A very, very young prospect, a guy who has immense power for a player this early on in his football development career. The power certainly stood out at Purdue. He led the Big Ten in sacks last season. And by the way, some dominant players in that Big Ten last year, right? Basically every good Michigan defensive player there. JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State, Jack Sawyer from Ohio State, a couple of edges who will get drafted this year. There was some big-time talent in the Big Ten last year. Nobody had as much sack production. Nick Scourton, who's just carried it on to Texas A&M, who, by the way, quietly playing some dominant football right now down there in College Station after that season-opening loss to Notre Dame. But Scourton, I think the question would be, I think he's been excellent so far this season. It's just sort of figuring out, which skill proves most dominant for him at the next level because of that semi-unique build. He's not as athletic, in my opinion, as some of the other top edge rushers, which, by the way, we're going to dive into in just a couple of minutes. But at 20 years old, the immense development has been no surprise. I had him as the 12th rated player coming into the season. No reason to believe that his spot has dropped too low from right there.
And he'll get a nice spotlight game on Saturday night. They play primetime on ABC against LSU. So someone to keep an eye on for anybody getting set to watch that game. Field, as we come to your player, as I've mentioned many times, and we all mention it on social media every week, if you send us your questions using the hashtag #FirstDraft on Twitter X, these guys are going to answer a bunch of them every week. And Harris, whose handle is Raptors Harris, actually brings you directly to the doorstep of where you want to go, Field. So let me read Harris's question. Field, where do you see James Pearce Jr. eventually going in the draft range-wise? And what would you say is the best scheme fit?
So let me start with the scheme fit here, Greeny. I believe this: when you're a player that could be drafted as high as like the top 5 overall, I don't care about the scheme, right? You're good enough to play in any scheme. That's how talented you are. James Pearce, I thought, had a chance to, coming into the season, become the best player in this year's draft class based off of physical abilities. I was just talking about how Nick Scourton has kind of this unique build at 6'4", 280 pounds. James Pearce is like 6'5", 245 pounds. 242 is his official listed weight right now on the Tennessee roster. This kid has all the physical tools here to be great. Now, been kind of a slow start to the season, but he has heated up of late. He's got 3.5 sacks early on this season. 3 of them have come in the past 3 games, including 1.5 in that spotlight game against Alabama, in which every NFL GM has either already watched it or will be watching it plenty of times over the next, when we have 6 months until the NFL draft begins. I think Pearce maybe has a case for the most explosive edge rusher in the entire draft class. And when you factor that into also his size, right? He's a bigger guy than somebody like Abdul Carter, who I would say might be right there with James Pearce in terms of explosiveness. But Pearce, being a little bit heavier, a little bit larger, makes that explosiveness that much more impressive. At his best, he can be a dominant, pin your ears back pass rusher. I think the question for James Pearce will be, why the slow start early on this season, and can he be consistent the rest of the way? But I think the range begins as high as like pick 2 or 3 in the draft. Maybe it goes down to pick 12 or 15, depending on some other factors that are always going to play into a player's draft value. But I think James Pearce has the chance to be the first edge rusher taken when we get to April, Mel.
Yeah, and it's Field, I think, and Grady, I think you look at the expectations coming in. He was way up there, and he said quiet in some games early. Now hitting his stride, but he was disruptive. And I think the fact that he has those 2 defensive tackles inside that can clog those inside running lanes and get after it and to provide a little bit of disruption in the backfield from the middle, from that center of that defense. Then you have Pearce Jr. off the edge. He should be able to finish strong. You said 242. He looks even leaning at number 27. Yeah, you look at it, he almost looks like he's about 225, 230, but he is around 240. And he has the length, and he has the ability to obviously affect a quarterback backing down passes with that length. So I want to see how he finishes. I think he's a 10 on the big board. He did move down from where he was in August, late August, when you come out with that first big board to where he is now. Mykel Williams is back now. Mykel Williams made his presence felt this past week, Field, as you thought he would, as we all thought going in after he had the tightrope surgery. He's back. He's looking really good, and he's going to finish strong as well. So Mykel Williams, I think, ahead of Pearce Jr. right now, with Scourton, kind of a different entity, as you said, with his size and the way he plays with that physicality. But I think when you look at James Pearce Jr., the rest of the season will determine whether he is that early first rounder or drops down just a bit.
Well, so let's then finish or follow in that path. We'll go a little bit out of the order that we planned, because you just mentioned Mykel Williams. These are similar position players, or similar roles anyway. Williams has been hurt a lot of this year. We haven't seen enough of him, or that much of him. Then he gets the huge spotlight game the other night, and he was, I thought, I'll leave the analyzing to you guys, but obviously you couldn't miss him in the game against Texas the other night. So Field, as we compare the players we're looking at here who play the same position, the edge from Tennessee, James Pearce, spotlight game on ABC, followed by the edge from Georgia, Mykel Williams, spotlight game on ABC. How do you stack them up against each other?
You know what Saturday night was? Saturday night was a reminder that Mykel Williams says, I belong in the conversation for the #1 pick in the draft. That's how good I can be at my very best. And that spotlight was immense, not just factoring in that he had great production, but it was against an awesome duo of Texas offensive tackles. You guys know how highly I believe Kelvin Banks will go in the draft this upcoming year. And that was a great battle for the first 3 or so quarters. It felt like it was that was 2 heavyweights getting after it, back and forth, some really good reps on both sides of the ball. Texas now playing from behind. What does that allow Georgia to do? Pin the ears back and go. And Mykel Williams, there's really no answer for him, at least amongst the college offensive tackles, for these reasons, Greeny. I was just telling you about how impressive James Pearce's explosiveness is when you factor in his frame at 6'5" and 242 pounds. I don't care what they list Mykel Williams at. He looks about 6'7", with arms, maybe not quite Mario Williams type length, Mel, but this guy he looks like, I'd say he looks like an NBA wing out there right now. The guy has just got these freakishly long arms. He's got this massive frame. Now, the sack production going into this past Saturday night might leave you saying to yourself, like, how good is this guy, right? 4.5 sacks last season. The quiet start this year. When Georgia allows him to rush, he is as dominant of a player as there is in the entire draft class on the defensive side of the ball. You want power? He's got immense power. You want length? He's got plenty of length. You want explosion? He's got that. You want them all mixed together? He's got that as well. And I thought that by the end of the game, and I get it, when you're up 2 touchdowns or 15 points in the fourth quarter, defensive ends don't have to worry about defending the run. They can just get after it. So it puts the offensive tackle at a bit of a disadvantage. I'm not trying to make too many excuses, but I thought at the end of the game, he had Kelvin Banks guessing. Kelvin Banks didn't know, hey, am I supposed to expect power from this guy? Am I supposed to expect him to run around me on the edge? What do I do? It's like a pitcher who's got 4 different pitches he can throw, right? That's what I felt like Mykel Williams showed on Saturday night. Got to do it more consistently. Same refrain I just used from James Pearce. But Mel, that kind of performance, I really believe was the kind that puts you into that conversation to be like the next Bosa brother going in that first 2 or 3 picks overall in the draft.
Yeah, evaluating is subjective. It's what you see, and you always have to factor in when you have guys, we say quarterbacks on the field at the same time. It's important because it is a subjective evaluation. And for the watch James Pearce Jr. and Mykel Williams and to see where he was, say, well, why do you downgrade him if he's injured? Well, you wanted to see sack production. You mentioned it, Field. You got to get the production from those sack numbers. You have to. Oway didn't have a sack at Penn State. He still went in the late first round. He didn't go early to mid first round. He was a talented kid coming out of Penn State. He went at the end of the first round. Some thought he even dropped into the mid second because he didn't have that sack production at Penn State. You think about Trayvon Walker, same thing we said about him coming out of Georgia, went number 1 overall. But he's been kind of a little bit up and down with the Jacksonville Jaguars. A good year last year, this year a little spotty in terms of his sack numbers. But bottom line is they're coming up. It was really 3 games, 2 games, and then this last week he had the 1 sack. But in terms of Mykel Williams, when you looked at him, Field, and you watched him and you compare him to James Pearce Jr., I came out of Saturday thinking Mykel Williams is the guy I really have to have. If I'm looking for a guy off the edge, now he looks the part. He plays with a sustained intensity level, which I like to see with the energy. And I think when you look at that size and the ability to be that dominant performer who can really affect the game in a lot of ways and close that game out into the first half at the end of the game, Mykel Williams, yeah, and I think when we get to late April, if he keeps playing at this level, yeah, I think he's going to be in the mix to be what we thought back in August he could be, one of the top 2-3 picks in this draft. So I came out of Saturday thinking, yeah, he deserves to be maybe a little higher than I had him. I had him actually going into the week at 7. I'm going to probably have him up there around 3-4. Edge rushers with his kind of talent and the way he performs. And I think he's going to build on this coming back from that ankle injury. I'm excited to see how this end of the season goes for Mykel Williams because he is a big time player.
I know these names are not unfamiliar for people that do dive into the draft stuff, but we're talking about a class that I think could be flipped upside down relative to where we have been in recent years. I know that typically Greeny is the one who's asking the questions and looking for us to do the analysis, but I throw this out to both of you. I wonder legitimately, and I could be totally off here, if we see a few more teams that would be kind of coin flippy in terms of whether they should take a quarterback or take the best player available, just land on best player available because of the caliber of players here, but also the fact that we have seen the quarterback hit rate be so low recently. I'll give you an example of a team that did this 3 years ago, and they were lambasted for it. And maybe they have their quarterback solution going forward. I'm not totally certain that this guy is like a 10-year fixture. But in 2021, when 5 quarterbacks went in the first 15 picks, the Broncos took Patrick Surtain II, 8th overall. And everybody, myself included, thought like, wow, Justin Fields is sitting right there for you. Why don't you go that direction? Surtain looks like he was the right pick 3 years later, is, perhaps the best defensive back in all of football. And now they have Bo Nix. I wonder, and again, we're just guessing in this regard, but I wonder if teams might say to themselves, it's just in a class that doesn't have a sure thing. There's no Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams or even a Drake May this year. To maybe just lean towards that dominant 6'7" edge rusher who we think this guy could be, maybe not quite Myles Garrett level, but like do what the Browns did that year, where they, of course, the Browns have long been looking for a quarterback, but like Myles Garrett's that good of an edge rusher that you just take him and just say, yeah, figure out the quarterback at a later date.
Yeah, it's a good point, Field. I think when you look at the history of the draft and what's going on, you can always pick and choose and cherry pick different things to make a point. I think it's kind of going both ways. I think Mario Williams, Reggie Bush was the big decision that Houston had to make. Remember, they went Mario Williams because they were dealing with Peyton Manning in the division. I think Charlie Cashley said, hey, I got to beat Peyton Manning. I got to get somebody to get after him. And you can find those guys. So he passed on Reggie Bush. But remember, I think wasn't it Denver passed on Josh Allen to take Bradley Chubb?
They did, yes. I think did they trade down?
I remember back in the day when Bill Parcells was running the Dolphins front office, and he kind of got a little cute. He said, okay, I can get the quarterback in the second round. I'll pass on Matt Ryan, and I'll take Jake Long, the left tackle out of Michigan. So he took Jake Long, number 1 overall, waited until the second round and took Chad Henne out of Michigan with all those starts at Michigan in the Big Ten. Didn't work out so well. Passing on Matt Ryan for Jake Long and taking Henne didn't work out great there. So, you really, it's as I say, there's no perfect formula for this. There's no way you say nothing's 100%. So you just got to, I think your point's well taken, because the quarterbacks right now, I would say outside of Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, Jalen Milroe, disappointing since that Georgia game.
We cursed him.
What's that?
It's our fault. We cursed him. We sat here and we sang his praises and we said, hold on, we talk about this guy as a potential quarterback 1. And then he, Bill Parcells, don't take the cheese, right? Don't take the cheese. Maybe he took the cheese. He took the first draft cheese, and he has laid a couple of eggs since then.
Yeah, and Quinn Ewers, I'm looking at these. You want to move on with Quinn Ewers? I was asked the question this morning, would you rather have right now, Field? I'll ask you and Greeny. We watch them. Obviously, Arch Manning. If I had a choice right now between Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning to be my NFL quarterback, and even if I have to wait a year for Arch Manning, I'm waiting. I'll take Arch Manning. Same. But, Quinn Ewers to me right now has dropped a bit. Carson Beck has dropped a bit from where we were. So of the 5 quarterbacks that we defined as potential first-rounders, 2 remain standing, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. We'll have to see what Drew Aller, and you mentioned the age of score. Drew Aller's, I believe, right now 20 years of age. Which Drew Aller's, how does he finish out the year with Penn State, knowing that they had to get over the hump and win that big game? USC game in overtime. That wasn't a big game. Maryland just beat USC. USC's got 4 losses. Let's wait till Drew Aller plays a defense and plays in a game, a spotlight game where he can perform at 20 years of age. Do you go back? Do you come out? But I think of the quarterbacks right now, Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are the 2 that are in that mix to be top 5 picks, which will be overdrafting for me.
Agreed.
But they're still going to be somewhere in that top 5, more than likely, depending upon how the end of the year goes.
Can I go back to Field's question?
Yes. I want your take too, Greeny.
There's a devil's advocate to be played here, which is you say Denver may have found their quarterback, but they kind of took a circuitous route to get there.
Yes.
Right? It cost them a fortune and a ton of draft capital to try Russell Wilson. And that's one of the things. Maybe they don't have to do that if they draft somebody. And Cleveland, who we talk about, every year they're looking for a quarterback. Well, they go out and practically their entire future to get Deshaun Watson, and it turns out to be a disaster. Now, in many cases, that doesn't turn out to be a disaster. The bottom line is these things are inexact sciences no matter how you do it. And my opinion is that it winds up having a lot more to do with the situation that people wind up in than it does who they are themselves. Deshaun maybe not falling in that category, but the circumstances, I think, have a lot more to do with it than anything else.
You mentioned Justin Fields, Greeny. I think the Chicago Bears owe Justin Fields a lot. And I'll tell you what, because without Justin Fields, right, they're not trading that pick. Remember that pick? That they said, okay, we don't want Bryce Young. We have Justin Fields.
Right.
And that allowed them to get all this draft capital and more and fortify. And then Caleb Williams comes in. Then you trade Justin Fields to Pittsburgh. You basically give him away because you had made that mind. Justin Fields has allowed the Bears to be where they are right now. So it would have been complete. History would have been rewritten if it wasn't for that. And Justin Fields is now doing really well in Pittsburgh, gave way to Russell Wilson. And I'll tell you what, if that's not an interception at the end of the first half with about 1:40 remaining, the Jets had the Steelers where they wanted them. They had them on the ropes. 15-6 lead. We got the ball. Even if we don't score, we got the ball to start the second half. They may be booing Russell Wilson leaving the field at the end of the first half if they don't get that ball back. And then Russell Wilson gets the ball, touchdown, boom, and then all of a sudden he's the hero. He's the toast of the town. So in a blink, Beanie Bishop may have spelled what the disaster and allowed Russell Wilson, propelled Russell Wilson was one Beanie Bishop, undrafted free agent out of West Virginia.
Not only an undrafted free agent, today's the Nerding Out Show. Our guy, Beanie Bishop, didn't even get to go to the combine. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, this guy led the FBS and PBUs last year. Like, isn't the point or part of the point of being a cornerback to get your hands on the football, right? And this guy starting in week 1 as the nickel corner for the Pittsburgh Steelers and can't even get an invite to the combine? Make it make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. But again, I digress.
That interception probably was also the end of the Jets season, but I won't digress there. You just mentioned the Browns, or we were talking about the Browns. Let me sneak in another question, #FirstDraft from Twitter X. And this is from Corey Hughes. Field, I'll start with you, but I want to hear from both of you on this.
Yep.
With the devastating injury to Deshaun Watson, that who knows exactly what it means. Maybe he never takes another snap for them. The contract obviously will go a long way towards deciding that. But Corey is sort of projecting the Browns to be a team that could have the first pick in the draft this year. So Corey's question, Field, is do the Browns draft Travis Hunter or a quarterback with the number 1 pick?
The Browns are going to be stubborn based off what we have seen in terms of their insistence on Deshaun Watson remaining their starter this season. You know, I'll just my quick stance on that was I can't guarantee you that Jameis Winston will be markedly better than Deshaun Watson, but I'd sure like to find out. Right. That was my stance. I'd like to know at least, like, wouldn't it be easier to tell us that was the case by playing him as opposed to a guy who was the first overall pick in the draft, who's come in as a backup before and sparked an offense a little bit like he did in New Orleans. Like, I think there's a chance he will be better than what Deshaun was. I would take a quarterback, though, if I'm the Cleveland Browns, because the bottom line is whether Deshaun Watson fulfills the final 2 years of his contract with Cleveland or not. And obviously all the money is guaranteed. So it's on Cleveland to decide whether he sticks there for the final 2 years. Whether he's there for the next 2 years or not, they don't have their quarterback solution. We've been on the conveyor belt of looking for a quarterback for, 35 years now for the Cleveland Browns. I get it. And I know that Browns fans might be sitting there saying to themselves, we've tried everything. Is there anything else you can possibly come up with other than drafting one high? My answer would be just keep swinging. And I get it. It's not a great quarterback class. And I'm with Mel, and I want to show great discipline. I really am trying to hold myself to this for the next 6 months. Because, by the way, 6 months from today is the start of the NFL draft in Green Bay, Wisconsin. That I don't believe, based off where we are right now, that I could throw a quarterback within the first 5, 7, maybe even 10 prospects based off what we have seen and who we expect to come out. That being said, you got to keep swinging. You just have to, because even if the quarterback has a lower percentage chance of being a star than a Mykel Williams or a Travis Hunter or whoever it might be, if that quarterback does become a star, it's worth so much more than any other position in the entire sport. So I would be leaning towards a quarterback, Mel.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough call. It really will, because Travis does so much on both sides of the ball. And same, he hasn't been 100% at Colorado, but we'll see down the stretch what he becomes. We know what kind of player he is. He's the best player in this draft. So he's like, well, you have corners, but you also need receivers. You know, Amari Cooper's now in Buffalo. So, you know, and then you can sprinkle Travis in. I don't care how many corners you have. And one of those may be moving on. We have to see about trades possibilities there. But with Travis, if you pay him at wide receiver, you can sprinkle him in the secondary. Play him at corner, sprinkle him in at wide receiver. So he's that unique talent, which is going to make it a tough call. And then you have to grade it. I think this is a year that really screams, grade them based on just being a quarterback, not positional value. Just grade them. And if you have them on the board at 10, 12, 15, and you're picking 3, how the hell can you take them? You know, it makes no sense. I understand swinging. It's the most important position in all sports. We said it a million times, quarterback in the NFL. Get it. But if you don't believe in that quarterback, you've done all this. Why are we wasting all these time talking about grading quarterbacks and going to games, watching games, going to combines, pro days, psychological testing, this, that, and the other thing, to put them up there just because they're a quarterback? Let's raise them from 12 to 3 and take them. I understand about swinging, keep swinging for the fact, keep swinging, but it's got to be worth taking that swing. You don't want to be swinging at a pitch outside just to swing. You know, wait till it's at least within the range to hit that ball out of the park, Field.
Because it is in an exact science. That's a hard thing to say. It's an inexact science is the quarterback evaluation. Hey, look, let's go turn around to that massive backyard. Is it a massive backyard or a moat outside the Kiper compound? Which one is it? Whichever one it is, Mel, turn around and go look outside and go say hello to Lamar Jackson, who went 32nd overall in the draft, by the way. If the NFL had it figured out, he would have gone first or second in that draft class, whatever. We can debate Lamar versus Josh Allen until the cows come home. I just look at them as 2 of the 3 best quarterbacks on the entire planet right now. The bottom line is those guys are elite. The NFL, we never will. All of us, everybody who studies quarterbacks will never figure it out.
Clueless.
Yes. Yep. So that's why you keep swinging, is because even if our gut tells us right now, like, God, it's a hard case for me to make is for Cam Ward is better, Shedeur Sanders better than Mykel Williams and James Pearce and Travis Hunter and all these guys. Maybe he is. And if he is, the world tells us that quarterback play influences the outcome of football games more than any other position in sports. You got to do it. You have to do it. You have to if you're the Browns.
And I'll just say real quick, I disagree with this. I agree with you on everybody's clueless with evaluating quarterbacks because we can always hang our hat on a guy we like, that with all the guys we were wrong on. But situations sometimes dictate what teams do, and what happened in a previous draft or 2 years ago affects their decision making now. It certainly did with Josh Allen because they had drafted Paxton Lynch, right? And we can't do that. We got to go and get Case Keenum, right? So everything affects your decision making. But I think to do that exercise of evaluating, trust what you're seeing and trust your rating, and don't move a guy like Jake Locker up or Blake Bortles up or Christian Ponder up or EJ Manuel up or anybody up just because they're a quarterback. And if you do that, Field, 9 times out of 10, there's going to always be guys that are going to, it's not a perfect world. Nothing's 100%, but if you do trust your guys in that building, that we're all pretty good evaluators. If we're in this building and we think this guy's the 12th best player because he's a quarterback, he's 12, let's not take him at 3 because he's a quarterback. Now, if there's a guy at 5 or 4 and we're picking, fine, but not at 12 or 15. So I think go through that exercise of putting them up on that board for a reason, and it may protect you a little bit. And I'm not saying that there won't be a Brock Purdy's Mr. Irrelevant when Trey Lance, that same organization, took him at 3 overall.
Right.
Okay. They made a great pick with Mr. Irrelevant. Okay. Save him from being an undrafted free agent and going somewhere else. Okay. Let's just get him. We guarantee we got him. But they also took Trey Lance 3, the same brain trust. Made a huge mistake, but it was backed up by that. You go back to Heath Schuler and Gus Frerotte. You go back to RG3 and Kirk Cousins. There's a lot of examples of teams hitting on one but missing on the early one. So, but I do think putting them on that board and trusting your board at the end of the day is the only way to go.
Got to take one. Got to take him. Got to do it. Got to do it. Write that one down too. Is that another bet I can win on the draft? The Browns?
I don't bet.
Here's what I will tell you. I can tell you which quarterbacks have the best chance to be good coming out in the draft. The ones that are coached by Kevin O'Connell and Kyle Shanahan and Andy Reid, and not the ones who are coached by, you all know who all the other people are.
But Trey Lance was out there, Greeny. Trey Lance was out there to prove it's not a perfect world.
Right. And that was a kid who had played one game in the 2 years prior to the time that he was drafted, and they named him the starter, and then he got hurt, and the rest has been history. Who knows what would have happened one way or another? To me, that has a lot to do with it. As we segue back to our list of players who are going to hear their names, I just want to make one observation. Field, I don't know if this will resonate with you, but Mel and I are a lot older. We started going through these names, and we named 3 pass rushers. One of them wears the uniform number 11. One of them wears 13, and one of them wears 27.
Yeah.
If right now, Mel, in our childhood, we're looking forward to this and saying, what the actual heck is going on with these guys wearing these numbers, right?
56 and 91, a little bit different, right? The days of Lawrence
pass rusher should not be number 27.
Well, the red hot number, and I saw it when I was at Calvert Hall when we built that championship team back in 2010. Everybody wanted the defensive players, the edge guys all wanted number 11. Number 11 for an edge guy, defensive player. That's what they wanted. And go back to Micah Parsons, right? You go back to all the guys, LeVar Arringtons and all the different ones. Number 11 became that hot number. And Nick Scourton is wearing number 11 after wearing number 5 at Purdue. So to Karini's point, number 1 became a number 11. So it is, crazy. I have no problem with that. I think you can wear any number you want. Okay. Look at Judge wears 99, right? I don't know. The quarterback at Ohio State was wearing number 33 to honor.
How'd that one work out, Mel? How'd that one work out? Devin Brown last year. I didn't like that number. I felt like they were doomed, but I'm seeing a quarterback wearing 33. I felt doomed.
I will say this, Field. I'm with you. I want to see everybody in that number to see if they look good in that number.
I think that the reason that the players want to wear 1 and 11 is because the vertical stripes are slimming. I really do. I think they think it makes them look more streamlined, but that's a different conversation. Okay, let's go back to players. We talked a lot about pass rushers. Mel, how about if I need a safety? Give us everybody a name they're going to hear on that first Thursday night in Green Bay.
It's rare to get a kid who played middle linebacker in high school. It's 6'3", 200, pushing 230, 227 is what they list him at. Nick Emmanwori at South Carolina, 3-year starter, true junior, 49 total tackles, 9 more than the second leading tackler at South Carolina. He's got 49. He's got 33 of those are solos. He's got 4 interceptions, plays with energy, tackles well in space, has the ball skills. Field at number 7. You know, I remember back in the day, I think David Fulcher wore that at Arizona State way back in the day. But I think when you look at that kid, Nick Emmanwori, and I'll tell you what, I give Shane Beamer and their personnel staff, they have done some pretty good evaluations at South Carolina. That team gets some players. When I go back to Steve Spurrier, and a great job Steve Spurrier did there. You know, remember Jadeveon Clowney, Lattimore, Stephon Gilmore, the list goes on and on. The players, Alshon Jeffrey during those years, South Carolina Gamecock. This team's got players. TJ Sanders up front gets after it, and a fortunate corner, good player. I mean, they got some athletes, and they play hard for Shane Beamer. They play hard. And I'll tell you what, Nick Emmanwori is a talented football player who can wear a lot of hats and do a lot of things for you. He just jumped. When you're watching South Carolina, that number 7 jumps out at you.
Tell you what, I had a scout go through South Carolina recently who said how many NFL teams would prefer their offensive line to the defensive line to the South Carolina defensive line. They might got 4 guys that get drafted. That's how loaded they are on the defensive side of the ball. Not all this year because they've got, you know, true freshmen and true sophomores who are contributing. Probably my favorite part about Nick Emmanwori is I think back to a couple of SEC defensive backs who, when they had the football in their hands, became men possessed. Tyrann Mathieu and Eric Berry, legends at LSU and Tennessee. They had the football in their hands and they had one idea in their mind: 6 points going the other way. Emmanwori's got a pair of pick sixes already this year. You know, flipped the game against, was it Kentucky, the 102-yard return for a touchdown, or the 95-yard return for a touchdown. He looks, I mean, he looks like he could play, you know, wide receiver for the Gamecocks in the open field, but the way that he runs, big, incredibly physically imposing player. You know, last year we had a kid in James Williams coming out of Miami who was 6'3" and 200 and some pounds. Ended up going, was it undrafted, Mel, or late? Either 7th or undrafted. And the big concern was, like, what are the movement skills? How fluid is this guy? Can he open up his hips and get back deep in the field? When you got Tyreek Hill, you know, jetting down the sideline, you got to find a way to make a play on him. Nick Emmanwori is not mechanical, right? This guy looks like the kind of player that can sort of swivel the hips, get in and out, and play sort of laterally as well as, you know, going forward, coming downhill towards the line of scrimmage. Really fun player, a lot to watch, and pretty interesting safety class again. Pretty darn interesting safety class this year. Better than last year's class, that much is for sure.
And then, Field, let's finish up this group with a pairing. Michigan may not be having the season they were dreaming of, but that is not the fault of their defensive tackle.
That's correct. It's not Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant's faults whatsoever. 2 guys who get the job done in very, very different ways. Mason Graham, little smaller guy. He's been playing, it's true freshman season, and playing like meaningful, versatile snaps since his true freshman year at Michigan. Wears number 55, an elite pass rusher, super disruptive. Coming up the middle, he reminded me a little bit of like Braden Fisk last year. Younger, he's young. Braden Fisk, remember, is an older prospect, but more size from Mason Graham and a little bit more explosive as well. And by the way, Braden Fisk went in the 2nd round after the Rams mortgaged a 2025 2nd-round pick to move up to get Braden Fisk. So I was impressed. I've been super impressed with Mason Graham, you know, playing through some stuff this year, and also with Michigan's defense having, I've said this before, they have to play hero ball. The Michigan defense has to play perfect football for them to have any chance to win anymore because of their offensive struggles. Are you waving the white flag? The offense is, Mel? Is that what you're saying?
A penalty flag I'm throwing on you. I'm throwing a penalty flag. The NFL's had a lot of flags. So I'm throwing a flag. You did. That's a young fielding stunt right there.
What happened?
A 1 and 1A, throwing 2 players in. Get into 2
defensive
tackles to try to stretch it out a little longer. I was always called a stunt when I did it. I'll call it a young Field Yates stunt. Getting 2 players in for the price of 1. But that's okay. But that's
I'm going to negotiate. No, I'm bargaining. I'm bargaining right now, Mel. Don't you steal my thunder here on Kenneth Grant. Big number 78, because Mason Graham may not be the biggest defensive tackle. Kenneth Grant was like a bully out there. This guy just pushes people around. Number 78, incredibly powerful, not as explosive, not going to have as many sort of like, you know, sudden moves up the field to get to the quarterback in a hurry with his quickness. But my goodness gracious, try blocking the guy. Good luck. It's not going to happen. He can really impact the run as well, but not just a run defender. Does have the ability to just collapse the middle of the pocket. It just totally changes the avenues the quarterback has to escape the pocket when he is dropping back. So 2 players, 2 for the price of 1 because I'm a good negotiator. 2 Michigan defensive tackles who I think both have a chance to be first-round picks. Graham, absolutely no question about it. I think Kenneth Grant certainly could get there as well.
Okay, let's move on to the next thing here, and we're going to bring in Dr. Kiper. I'd like to request that Dr. Kiper enter the conversation because, Mel, most people think you probably should have been a doctor. You certainly seem as though you would have been a good one because the injury factor in college football this year feels as though it has been very significant. We talked earlier about Mykel Williams. He's missed so many games this year and all the rest of it. And then just last week, you told us that Will Johnson, the outstanding corner for Michigan, was in the running in your mind to be the first pick in the draft, which would make him, if it happened, the first ever corner to go number 1 overall. And by the way, I bounced that idea off Rex on Saturday when we were doing NFL Countdown, and he loved it. He absolutely loved the concept. And then, of course, he suffers that whenever you hear a toe, that's always that always winds up being a worse injury than you expect it to be. So, Mel, when we talk about teams evaluating players who have some sort of injury concern, what do the fans need to know?
Well, I think that some highly rated guys that have been injured and out for the year. We hope Will Johnson's okay. You don't get a lot from colleges about injuries, but when you saw Will Johnson have that injury, he's been banged up a little this year with the toe. Savone Revel Jr., the cornerback at East Carolina. I mean, dynamic player with great length, was having a tremendous year. He was climbing up the board. Right now, I even have him at 20 out for the year. He'll be back. Benjamin Morrison, Notre Dame corner, out for the year. He was at 21. Josh Simmons, the outstanding left tackle, formerly of San Diego State, injured knee, out for the year. That affects Ohio State's offensive line. Kevin Winston Jr., safety, Penn State's been out. We talked about R.J. Maryland, I think a little bit on, the son of Russell Maryland, great Miami Hurricane. I watched the game against Stanford, hit early second half, first drive, knee injury, out for the year. He was on his way to becoming a heck of an H-back prospect with the way he caught the ball, run after the catch. Curtis Rourke had the thumb injury. Quarterback at Indiana was doing a really good job and was kind of moving up and getting in that equation. He'll be back from that thumb injury pretty soon, hopefully not long. Tate Ratledge had the ankle injury early in the year at Georgia. He's coming back. Jordan Burch has missed the last couple of games, defensive end at Oregon with injury. And you go on and on. It's just been a year of that. But when you see 3 to 4 guys that are in the top 25 that are out for the year. 3, definitely. Josh Simmons, the tackle at Ohio State, Revel, the cornerback, junior cornerback at East Carolina, and Morrison, cornerback at Notre Dame. Not to mention Winston Jr., at safety at Penn State, who could be in that mix. Their field out for the year, okay? What happens come late April? Now, we've seen it before. Remember, Todd Gurley still went very high. We've had that happen with other players. But the prognosis from the combine, the late medical, when will these players be back on the field? Because they're all 3 are worthy of being probably mid-first rounders right now.
I think this one might be different, though. I felt like with Todd Gurley, like you're talking about a player that indisputably was one of the top 10 prospects in this year's draft. I think, Mel, if I had to bet, the player who had the best chance to be like one of the top 10 to 12 if healthy was Siobhan Revell. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, based on the way he was playing. Based on the way he was playing, definitely. He would be in that mix. Morrison at Notre Dame's a really good player.
He's right there. That's a good call. Yeah.
But I really thought Josh Simmons, the left tackle,
he was coming on.
I'm a big Ariante Urstery fan at Minnesota.
Yep.
But I think when you look at your guy, Kelvin Banks Jr. at Texas, right? Then you go to Will Campbell at LSU. Yep. Then you look at Simmons. You could make an argument he was the 3rd best offensive tackle in this draft. As a left tackle, and he could have been in that 12 to 20 range in terms of the draft. Now, where does he factor in? You're talking about October injuries. When are they going to be back? They're coming back in record time, some of these kids. We'll have to wait and see. But this rash of injuries to elite players hasn't really happened that much of late. And I just said this year, it's been, unfortunately, the NFL, talking about a war of attrition. We're not even halfway through the season, and teams are getting guys, talk about AOGs are coming into the NFL now. There's another occupation. Guys are now saying, hey, I'm back to playing football. Oh, now I can give it another shot, right? Yeah. I thought I was done. So it's amazing, the injury factor. And these guys are so big and they're so immense. These are just huge specimens. And Keyshawn Johnson said to me last year, before, we were talking about Bryce Young. He said, no, they're bigger, they're stronger, they're faster than they've ever been. I don't know how they survived. This is Keyshawn Johnson. It wasn't back in the 60s, 70s. Okay. Saying these guys are just massive. The size of the high school kids. I watch a lot of high school football. They're unbelievably big. And to me, that's a lot. Okay. So you don't put Pinto tires on an 18-wheeler. Okay. So again, that's what we're talking about, from the bone structure and the tendons, cartilage and all that. But we're still these guys aren't meant to be 300 plus pounds. So I think the size of these players at every level now has gotten through the roof. Did a study on ESPN.com back not that long ago. Offensive tackles coming in the league, average was 277 for a tackle. Guards were 266. Centers were 248. That wasn't
now 320.
Late 80s, guys. So early 90s. So think about where we are now. Bodies weren't meant to be this big, and you weren't meant to have to take a hit from guys that big. So in the NFL, we're not surviving. College football, we're not surviving. High school, I said it to Stan White, who played with the Baltimore Colts, great career at Ohio State. Saying, he was coaching at Gilman. I was at Calvert Hall, with that program, and saying, why are we seeing high school? He said, we never saw this back in the day. High school football players didn't get hurt to this level. Week after week, we got 2-3 guys going down. It's happening all over. High school, college, and pro. Guys just can't stay healthy because they're too big.
And I'll say this, as far as the evaluations go, our evaluations are going to be our evaluations, right? I've seen plenty of football from Harold Landry Jr. to have an idea of what he brings to the table. It just makes the pinpointing of where that player ends up a lot more difficult to size up, right? I'll give you an example from this most recent draft. Troy Fautanu. I thought one of the 10 best players in last year's draft class. Where's he wind up? 21st to the Pittsburgh Steelers, 22nd, whatever it was. There were teams that I talked to right before the draft because the idea that his draft status could be impacted by his medicals came up late in the process. I talked to teams that were picking high. It's just a little dicey for us. I talked to other teams that we have nothing. Our doctors are good with him. So every team's medical evaluation is going to be just a little bit different. So while some teams may say, hey, and I'm just making this up, hey, Siobhan Ravel is more like, an early second round pick because of the injury for us. There are others who might say, did you watch this guy? 6'2". The guy can play man-to-man coverage like this, good linear speed. That's a top 20 pick every day of the week. Medical evaluations by the individual team doctors will certainly influence how high or low some of these guys are on each team's boards.
All right, let me get in one more Twitter X question before we wrap, because we're so appreciative of everybody sending them in. And this one is one that I'm not sure that we can answer, but I do think it is worth talking about because I think it's something a lot of football fans are thinking about. Earlier in this conversation, Mel, you said that you think Shedeur Sanders remains one of two quarterbacks that is kind of hanging in there. If we're going to see quarterbacks go in that top, 3 to 7 range or whatever it is, he and Cam Ward are two guys that for this moment feel as though they're still there. Well, the real TT Fox sends us the following question. How much pull do you think Deion Sanders has in where Shedeur and Travis get drafted? Could they realistically pull an Eli Manning, which for the fans who don't know what that means, I assume most people do, but Eli Manning, whose dad was Archie Manning, who was the second pick in the draft once upon a time, and his career was basically defined by having played for terrible teams in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. People who are old enough to remember him play like Mel and I are. Archie Manning would have been a great player. We would remember him as a great quarterback if he had not played on terrible teams. And so Archie didn't want his son Eli going to San Diego, and they adjusted it. They were able to pull the strings behind the scenes, and the next thing you know, Eli Manning is a Giant instead of a Charger, and he's won 2 Super Bowls, and he's going to wind up in the Hall of Fame. So that's the history here. Mm-hmm. Mel, how much do you think Deion will be able to influence where his 2 stars wind up?
Yeah, I think the difference with there was Eli with Phillip Rivers and that whole working it out with Chargers and the Giants. And then we go back to John Elway. Remember, he was threatening about going to the Yankees and Baltimore, and they traded him to Denver, which affected Baltimore not staying here. The Baltimore Colt franchise was affected by that. So, again, it's happened before. I don't know if Shedeur is going to be as highly rated and as highly regarded as what Eli, certainly not what John Elway was. But I look at the top 9. I'll just go up because right now the top 9 picks, 7 of the 9 teams, guys, could use a quarterback possibly. or may think they are, whether I or feel we agree. Bottom line is they could possibly. Only two wouldn't would be New England, having Drake May, and Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence. All the other 7 of the top 9 teams picking could conceivably say, hey, let's bring in a young quarterback, right? Or take another shot at it. If Tennessee doesn't think Will Levis has it, let's go get a quarterback, right? Carolina gives up on Bryce Young, go get a quarterback. The Jets situation, New Orleans situation with Derek Carr, they want to go get a young quarterback there. Las Vegas, obviously, and the Giants. So to me, some may get forced up. Is Shedeur, to answer the question, Greeny, is Shedeur going to be rated highly enough by the time we get to do the process, or Cam Ward? But you asked specifically about Deion's influence. I don't see that steering teams away now. I just don't. I think I just don't think Shedeur is going to be a quarterback that we feel is to the level what Eli was at that year, or Rivers or Roethlisberger were that particular year. And Roethlisberger ended up dropping around that 10th spot. I'm not quite sure. Shedeur right now on my board and field, I'll ask you where he is on yours. I have Shedeur, and I'm high on Shedeur. I have him at 12. So at 12 isn't high enough to say I'm going to steer him here or there. I'm just going to hope he goes to a team. Obviously, all these teams are in the NFL. This nonsense. And I debated, remember, Grinny, you remember it with the whole thing with Joe Burrow. He can't go to Cincinnati. And I brought, hey, Kenny Anderson did pretty well. Carson Palmer did pretty well. Andy Dalton did pretty well. Kenny Anderson took him to a Super Bowl. So to me, what was wrong with Cincinnati? And if you're a competitor, you want to go. All the teams, the way it is with the draft, it's weighted to you to suit you. You have the right organization. You get the players going to be picking high each round. So I don't know why you would steer clear of any organization in the National Football. There's 32 of them. Why would you do that? And let's say, so I think John Elway would have been a Baltimore Colt, not a Denver Bronco. If Ernie, of course, he would have had it done his way. And certainly it worked out with Rivers and Manning the way it ended up there. Field, and I'll go to you. Where do you have Shedeur right now on your board?
Got him as quarterback 11. I'm sorry, 11th overall, quarterback 1. So quarterback 1 and player number 11 overall. It's a complicated question, Greeny, and it's certainly something that has come up in talking to people around the NFL, is how much does Deion want to influence where more so Shedeur, less so Travis Hunter, just because I think that Travis Hunter is going to go very, very, very high, regardless of who is picking in the first 5 or so selections, and B, while he is a very important figure in Travis Hunter's life, it's different being someone's father versus being someone's, close friend and coach and mentor. I think that here's one of the realities of whoever does draft Shedeur Sanders. You better have a coach that's got like an immense amount of, I would say, like mental toughness, because what's the reality of a team that's picking a quarterback very high? Almost every single time that happens, it's a team that's not very good. Regardless of how great a coach is, if you don't have a lot of talent, it's hard to win in the NFL. If a team that has Shedeur struggles out of the gates, you better believe that the questions are going to come up about whether Deion Sanders could potentially become the head coach of that team one day. While Deion has never said, matter-of-factly, hey, I want to coach this NFL team, I don't think anybody would be surprised if somebody as ambitious and successful as Coach Prime would one day want to try his hat in the NFL. It's hard to say with certainty that he will take a forceful stance to guide Shedeur to a particular team. I think it'd be naive of us to say that if there were two teams that were picking close to each other and one clearly represented an organization with more stability, that Deion would not prefer for his son to end up in the better spot for no other reason than he is a father. Each of us here are fathers, and I'm sure we would each love for our children to end up in the most stable of circumstances, regardless of what it is they are doing, whether it's going to preschool like mine or going to college or being not being a grandpa Mel. So it's hard to say. I'm not trying to dance around the question, but I don't want to say anything definitively because we don't know. But I do think there is a chance that something like this could come up as we get closer to January and February.
Once the draft order is set. Right here, Field. My definitive comment is: if I'm Deion Sanders, I'll be thrilled wherever Shedeur goes, 1, 2, 3, 4 to anybody. If he gets into the top 5. And he goes to a team, they believe in him. They believe in Shedeur. I'm not worrying about the organization in the NFL or the team in the NFL because they're all going to they're picking in the top 5 for a reason. None of these teams traded up and got to pick from somebody else to be there, right? So to me, the infrastructure was supposed to be great in Carolina when Bryce Young went there. It didn't turn out to be that way. Everybody was questioning Houston. Turned out great for C.J. Stroud. It's not a perfect world. If I'm Deion Sanders, I'm looking at Shedeur, who's not elite of the elite, okay? He's not. You got him 11. I got him at 12, and I like him. I got him at 12. So to me, I'd be thrilled to see him go top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. In terms of the team that screams Shedeur Sanders is Las Vegas. He patterns himself kind of after Tom Brady. Tom Brady's going to influence this draft in Las Vegas in terms of the quarterback evaluation. They've already basically stated that, correct?
Okay.
So they're picking it right now. If you had a draft right now, it'd be eighth, right?
Okay.
Need a quarterback. Shedeur Sanders would make sense there.
Okay.
Now, could a deal be in place to say, hey, if you want to go up and get Shedeur in your 8, you want to jump up? Yeah, but that's not going to impact anything there to flipping quarterbacks the way I see it. Cam Ward, I don't think Cam Ward necessarily. I would be thrilled to go anywhere from Cam Ward, from Kenneth Word to Washington State and out of Miami. I'd be thrilled to be a top 5 pick regardless, Field. But Las Vegas, to me, just kind of screams Shedeur Sanders based on the whole Tom Brady influence.
So you're making the case then. You don't think that Deion, and I'm just going to make this up, we don't know where the draft order is going to end up. Let's just say the Browns are picking 3rd and the Raiders are picking 5th, and the team in between them is New England, who's not taking a quarterback. You don't think Deion's going to want to try to say, like, let's make it happen? He'd be a perfect fit in Las Vegas. You don't think he'd want him to go there with Tom Brady, and we know that him and Shedeur have a relationship, and certainly Tom and Deion do, versus the pit that has been the Cleveland Browns quarterback. But I just think it's natural to expect that to happen if there are 2 places that represent decidedly different outlooks. That would be my stance. Maybe I'm way off. Maybe I'm overstating the potential influence that Deion Sanders would have. But I would expect that. I just think it would be natural to expect exactly that.
Yeah, I just think Cam Ward's going to be in this equation, and somebody may have Cam Ward ahead of Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur kind of like Tom Brady. I don't think he's going to run a 40. Why run a 4.8, 40, 4.8? Don't run a 40. Tom Brady ran a slow 40, so don't run a 40. He doesn't have the howitzer for an arm. But he's an accurate passer, great processor. They say he holds the ball too long, but he's sped it up a little bit there. He's had that horrible offensive line most of his career at Colorado. So to me, you look at Shedeur, is he the elite of the elite quarterbacks? Does he scream right now, I'm the number 1 player in this draft. I'm the number 1 quarterback in this draft. I'm going to come in and be a franchise quarterback in the National Football League. Does he scream that, Field? No.
No. Mel, I'm telling you, we're going to look back on it. And these guys got to do a lot before we can say anything like, definitive. But finishing in the top 3 last year, having a top 3 pick last year proves immensely valuable. 3 quarterbacks that I think are a cut above not just all the other players in their class, but also the players in the subsequent class. I really believe it.
It's a fascinating question. And it's the kind of thing that whether it actually happens or not, everyone will be thinking about it and talking about it as we work our way to the draft. Thank you for all the questions. Again, tweet them at us anytime you want. Use the hashtag #FirstDraft. We will find them. And then tune in every Thursday during the season for full NFL draft analysis and to see if your questions are answered. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. We're here every single Thursday. For Mel and for Field, I am Greeny. Thanks so much for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next week.